Hi there, I'm Michael O'Neill. I'm now 9 years into my podcast journey. In 2012, I created a show called The Kick-Ass Life with David Wood, and I did everything behind the scenes. I did the brand, I did the intro and outro, I did the artwork, I did the social media, I did the editing, I did everything. David spoke into the mic, I did everything else. That show was a perennial top 10 favorite in the health section of, at the time, iTunes. Then I launched a show called Mechanic to Millionaire with my buddy Dave MacArthur. That show has done over 1 million downloads and prompted him to do a ton of live events and make hundreds of thousands of dollars from his podcast. Now, all of that branched into my own show, the Solopreneur Hour, which as of now has done almost 11 million downloads, allowed me to travel all over the world talking about podcasting and personal branding, and allowed me to do workshops and a bunch of really cool online courses. Podcasting has literally changed my life. It's also allowed me to consult and launch dozens of shows, including The Dentalpreneur with my buddy Dr. Mark Costas. He has taken that show and turned it into a multi-million-dollar endeavor with live workshops, live events, masterminds, advertising revenue, literally multiple millions of dollars from that one podcast. And he's a dentist. The point of all this is, I know a lot about how to launch a world-class podcast. From my 15 years as a branding expert and creative director, to my degree in broadcasting, telecommunications, and mass media, to my reputation as a world-class interviewer, I know the kit of parts to make a world-class podcast. Over the years, people have asked me to help them launch their shows because of the depth I go into when it comes to creating a podcast. That process is now in the 5-figure range. Depending on how much interaction I do with the client, it's usually $10,000 to $15,000. Now, that's a bit pricey for some people, but especially since the pandemic happened in 2020, people are seeing how much value having a podcast can do for their business and their personal brand. Now, I've proven this over and over again. In fact, one of my little side hustle shows, Beginner Audiophile, I was a complete unknown in the high-end audio industry. And then I had this really crazy thing happen. I was at one of the shows. I was having a conversation with someone in a hotel room, and someone poked their head around the corner, and they were like, "Beginner Audiophile?" And the guy had recognized my voice from the podcast, which was crazy. So now I can go to all of these audio shows, and people know me and the show. I went from being a complete unknown in the industry to now being one of the more respected personalities just because of the podcast. So here's the deal. I'm going to help you and 9 other people launch their world-class podcast. I have a Done With You program. It's called the Podcast Launch Group, or the PLG. We are going to go through a curated 8-week process. At the beginning of the 8 weeks, you ain't got nothing. By the end of the 8 weeks, and by the way, it's 8 sessions. It could last 10 weeks. It depends on holidays and availability. But by the end of that time, you are going to have at least one episode of your world-class show. The brand's going to be created. The artwork's going to be done. You're going to have an interview done if you are an interview type show. You're going to understand how to use the equipment. You're going to get the technology. You're going to get the gear. Every question you have over the course of this 8 to 12 weeks is going to be answered. So at the end of this time, you are going to have your own show. You can send it to your friends, you can send it to your relatives and be like, check it out. Here is my brain inside out for you guys all to hear. You're gonna have all the gear. You're gonna know how to physically use a microphone, which nobody tells you. It's a whole thing that people don't tell you about. All the technical stuff is gonna be answered. How do I upload it? How do I get it on Spotify? How do I get it on Apple Music? What's Libsyn? How do I propagate it to all of these different podcast apps all over the world? All of that stuff is going to be answered. We are going to be having weekly Zoom meetings. You'll also have an accountability partner. So any questions you have from the previous week or in the upcoming week, you'll be able to ask them and also ask me every single time. We will have a curriculum, which you'll get at the beginning of the course. You'll see the process that we are going to go through. I've done this now a number of times, and I know the exact process to launch a show, so you don't have to worry about any of it. I will answer every single question you have. So if this sounds interesting to you, if this sounds like something you'd like to do, go to podcastlaunchgroup.com, podcastlaunchgroup.com, click the button, sign up, put your deposit down. It's a non-refundable $1,000 deposit for this. The entire course, instead of $10,000 to $15,000, is $3,000. You're going to put $1,000 down as a deposit, so I know you're interested, I know you're serious. Immediately upon clicking that link and sending your deposit, you get access to my Art of the Interview course, which is really the only one of its kind on the market. I teach you how to become a world-class interviewer. And honestly, it even works for conversation. It makes you into a better conversationalist. You'll ask better questions, you'll listen better, you'll learn to ask questions that give you these beautiful open-ended answers that make better content for your podcast and actually better conversation in real life. It will also send a link to schedule a 20-minute welcome call so you and I can get to know each other a little bit. There's a Google form you will fill out, and that will give me a little bit of information that we can use on that welcome call to just start working on your brand and start thinking about the global things you need to think about to launch a show. So if you are interested in launching a world-class podcast, now is your chance. If you have any questions about anything I just talked about, you can either DM me on Instagram @SoloHour, SOLOHOUR, or you can email me, michael@solopreneurhour.com, and I'll get right back to you with any answers I can. We can schedule a quick call, whatever you need to feel better about this. But I'll tell you what, if you do it, you're going to have a world-class podcast in less than 3 months.